Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on BTV Global News Hour 12. My name is Temitope Oluwafemi. And now to the news in details. Senate Democrats are threatening to block funding for the Department of Homeland Security (DHS) unless new restrictions and oversight measures are imposed on U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE), escalating a budget standoff as a January 30 spending deadline approaches. Failure to reach an agreement could trigger a partial shutdown of the federal government. The report.
Democratic leaders say they will not support the DHS funding bill in its current form, arguing that ICE enforcement practices require stronger accountability following recent high-profile incidents involving federal agents. The disputes have turned DHS funding into a central pressure point in broader negotiations over government spending. At the heart of the disagreements are Democratic demand for reforms aimed at increasing transparency and limiting ICE operational authority. Lawmakers are pushing for mandatory body cameras for immigration agents, clearer identification requirements during enforcement actions, stricter rules governing arrests and searches, and expanded oversight mechanisms to investigate allegations of misconduct. Democrats argue that these measures are necessary to protect civil liberties and restore public trust in federal immigration enforcement. Republicans, however, have pushed back against tie-in policy changes to must-pass funding legislation. GOP leaders contend that DHS funding should move forward without additional conditions, warning that delays could disrupt critical national security and broader operations. Some Republicans have accused Democrats of risking a shutdown to advance policy goals unrelated to basic government funding. The White House has been involved in behind-the-scenes discussion with congressional leaders in an effort to prevent a lapse in funding, but negotiations remain unresolved. With the January 30th deadline drawing closer, lawmakers face mounting pressure to either strike a compromise or approve a temporary funding extension to keep DHS and other affected agencies operating. If Congress fails to act before the deadline, part of the federal government could shut down, affecting DHS components not covered by existing funding and creating uncertainty across multiple agencies. While essential services would continue, a shutdown could delay operations for law workers and heighten political tension in Washington. As talks continue, Senate Democrats maintain the meaningful ICE reforms must be included in any final agreement, setting the stage for a high-stake showdown just days before the government's funding expires. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Metal platforms Microsoft and Tesla have kicked off the latest earnings seasons of the so-called Magnificent Seven technology giants, with Meta emerging as a clear standout, while Microsoft and Tesla delivered results that drew a more cautious response from investors. The report.
Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, reported strong quarterly earnings that exceeded market expectations. Revenue was boosted by robust growth in digital advertising, improved efficiency in its core app businesses, and continued progress in artificial intelligence tools used by advertisers. The company also issued an upbeat outlook for the coming quarter, reinforcing confidence that its heavy investment in AI is translating into stronger sales and profitability. Investors welcomed the results, pushing Meta shares sharply higher. Microsoft also posted solid earnings supported by steady demand for its software products and growing interest in its AI-powered services. However, investors' enthusiasm was muted by signs that growth in its cloud business, particularly Azure, is moderating compared with previous quarters. In addition, Microsoft continued heavy spending on data centers and AI infrastructure raised concerns about costs, leading to a mixed market reaction despite the company's beating earnings expectations. Tesla results were similarly mixed. The electric vehicle maker reported earnings that topped forecasts, helped by cost control and revenue contributions beyond car sales. However, investors remained cautious due to ongoing pressure on vehicle margins, intense competition in the EV market, and uncertainty around future delivery growth. While Tesla shares edged higher after the report, the gains were modest compared with Meta's rally. Overall, the first round of earnings from the Magnificent Seven highlights a divergent picture across big tech. Meta has reassured investors with strong performance and confidence guidance, while Microsoft and Tesla have shown resilience but face closer scrutiny over growth momentum and spending as the earnings season continues. Evelyn Izibili reporting for Beetv News.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, has conducted a search at an election office in Fulton County, Georgia, as part of an ongoing inquiry connected to President Donald Trump's false claims that the 2020 presidential election was marred by widespread voter fraud. The report.
The search took place at the Fulton County Election Facility outside Atlanta, according to officials familiar with the matter. Law enforcement authorities said the action was carried out in line with a lawful investigative process, though specific details about the scope of the search and the materials sought were not immediately disclosed. Fulton County played a central role in the 2020 election as it includes Atlanta, Georgia's most populous city and a Democratic stronghold. President Joe Biden won Georgia by a narrow margin of about 12,000 votes, helping secure his overall victory in the presidential race. Following the election, Trump repeatedly alleged that the results in Georgia and other battleground states were fraudulent, claims that were rejected by state and federal officials, courts, and independent audits. Georgia election officials, including Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, consistently stated that there was no evidence of widespread fraud that could have changed the outcome of the election. Multiple recounts and audits in Georgia, including a full-hand recount, confirmed Biden's victory. The FBI search comes amid broader investigations into efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Fulton County has been a focal point due to Trump's January 2021 phone call to Raffensperger, in which Trump urged the Secretary of State to find enough votes to reverse his loss. That call later became part of a criminal investigation led by Fulton County District Attorney. Local election officials said they are cooperating with federal authorities and emphasized that the county's election operations were conducted lawfully and transparently. Fulton County elections were run with integrity and the results were accurate, county officials have previously maintained. The FBI declined to comment further, citing standard policy on ongoing investigations. Trump has continued to deny wrongdoing and has repeatedly described investigations related to the 2020 election as politically motivated. The search underscores the continued legal and political fallout from the 2020 presidential election more than 4 years after voters cast their ballots and highlights the ongoing scrutiny surrounding claims that have been widely discredited by evidence and court rulings. Evelyn Izibili reporting for Beetv News.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told U.S. lawmakers on Wednesday that Venezuelan interim government appears to be moving towards closer relations with Washington and that United States currently has no plans for further military action in the country. The remarks came during Rubio's first public testimony to Congress since Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was captured earlier this month in a U.S. military operation. The report.
We are certainly better off today in Venezuela than we were 4 weeks ago.
Rubio, speaking at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, said communication with Venezuela's new leadership have been very respectful and productive and indicated there is progress towards normalizing ties. He noted that the U.S. hopes to reopen its embassy in Caracas, which has been closed since 2019 as part of broader diplomatic engagement. While Rubio stressed that the administration does not intend or expect to take additional military action, he stopped short of entirely ruling out the use of force in the future if U.S. interests are threatened. Rubio emphasized that any further action would be tied to specific threats, and he described the U.S. presence in Venezuela as limited to diplomatic security, namely marine guards at the embassy. Rubio framed the capture of Maduro, now in U.S. custody facing charges, as part of a broader effort to reduce the influence of nations such as Iran, Russia, and China in Venezuela and to curb drug trafficking operations. He said the United States is working with interim leaders, including Delcy Rodriguez, who assumed power after Maduro removal, though there is ongoing debate about her long-term role. The hearing revealed sharp questions from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Some Republicans praised the administration's action, while Democrats raised concerns about transparency, legality, and long-term U.S. involvement. Rodeo acknowledged the need for clearer communication with Congress on future operations. Rodeo said the United States aims to guide Venezuela towards stability and diplomatic elections, and that current policies include facilitating Venezuelan oil sales under tight oversight. He reiterated that the immediate focus is diplomatic and political engagement rather than military escalation. Favor Kolawole reporting for Beetv News.
Gold prices surged to an unprecedented level on Thursday, extending a powerful rally as investors flocked to the precious metal for safety amid escalating geopolitical tensions and mounting economic uncertainty. The report.
Spot gold climbed above $5,500 per ounce, setting a new all-time high. The latest surge comes just days after bullion broke through the $5,000 threshold for the first time, underscoring the strength and speed of the current rally. Market analysts attribute the sharp rise to a combination of global risk factors that have shaken investors' confidence. Heightened geopolitical strains, concerns over global economic growth, and persistent market volatility have pushed investors away from riskier assets and into traditional safe havens such as gold. Economic uncertainty has also played a major role. Ongoing fears of slowing growth in major economies, fragile debt positions, and policy uncertainty in key financial markets have reinforced gold's appeal as a store of value. Investors are increasingly using the metal to hedge against potential currency weakness and financial instability. In addition, sustained demand from central banks and institutional investors has provided strong underlying support for prices. Central banks, emerging and developed economies alike have continued to build gold reserves, seeking to diversify away from traditional reserves currencies. The rally has been further fueled by momentum trading, with the breach of key psychological levels, first $5,000 and now $5,500, triggering additional buying across global markets. While some analysts caution that the pace of gains could prompt short-term profit-taking, many believe the broader trend remains intact as long as geopolitical risks and economic headwinds persist. For now, gold's latest record underscores its enduring role as a refuge in terms of global uncertainty. Zainab Mohammed reporting for Beetv News.
Kenya's High Court has dismissed a petition seeking to hold the government accountable for alleged security failures linked to the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombing, a ruling that marks a significant setback for survivors and families of the victims. The report.
The petition filed by survivors and relatives of those killed and injured in the attack argued that the Kenyan government had failed to provide adequate security measures, which they claimed contributed to the magnitude of the bombing. Over 200 people were killed and thousands more injured when a truck bomb exploded outside the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi on August 7, 1998. During the nearly 3-decade-long legal battle, the petitioners sought formal recognition of the government's responsibility and compensation from the losses suffered. However, the High Court found that the evidence presented was insufficient to hold the state liable, effectively rejecting the claims. The 1998 attack, orchestrated by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, remains one of the deadliest terrorist incidents in Kenya's history. It targeted the U.S. diplomatic mission but caused widespread casualties among Kenyan citizens and left a lasting impact on national security policies. Survivors and families have long criticized authorities for what they describe as delays and inaction in addressing security lapses. The court ruling, however, underscores the challenges of pursuing legal accountability decades after such incidents. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for Beetv News.
Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase announced on Wednesday that they will match the U.S. government's one-time $1,000 contribution to the newly created Trump accounts for eligible children of their U.S. employees, becoming among the first major financial institutions to back the federal savings initiative. The report.
The Trump Accounts program, established under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, provides a $1,000 tax advantage seed contribution from the U.S. Treasury into investment accounts for children born in the United States between January 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2028, as long as they have valid social security numbers. The funds are invested into low-cost stock market index funds and growth tax deferred until withdrawal, generally when the account holder turns 18. Under their pledges, both banks will provide a $1,000 employer match for each eligible employee's child who opens a Trump account. JP Morgan Chase Chief Executive Officer Jamie Dimon said the move reflects the bank's long-term commitment to the financial health and well-being of all our employees and their families, noting that the matching contribution makes it easier to start saving early and plan for the future. Bank of America made a similar commitment in an internal memo to staff. In addition to the match, Bank of America said it will allow employees to make pre-tax payroll deductions into their children's Trump accounts, helping workers contribute up to annual limits. Under IRS rules for the accounts, total annual contributions from families and employers are capped at $5,000 per child, with employer contributions generally limited to $2,500 per year. The Trump Account initiative is intended to promote long-term savings and investment habits from a young age, with supporters saying the combination of government seed money, employer matches, and family contributions could foster wealth accumulation over decades. Treasury officials estimate that if the initial deposits and subsequent contributions are left untouched and invested over the long term, the account could grow significantly by adulthood. The corporate backing from Bank of Africa and JP Morgan Chase follows similar commitments from other financial firms and employers, expanding benefits available to workers as part of employee financial wellness programs. Other companies and philanthropists have also pledged contributions to support wider participation in the program. The Trump accounts are scheduled to go live on July 4th, 2026, and eligible families can begin enrollment and contributions through IRS-designated forms and online portals once available. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for Beetv News.
And now to the world of business. Nigeria earned an estimated 55.5 trillion naira from crude oil sales in 2025, according to an analysis of production data from the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission and crude price figures from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The revenue represents an increase from the 50.88 trillion naira recorded in 2024, supported largely by relatively strong oil prices during the year. The report.
Data from the NUPRC show that Nigeria produced 530.41 million barrels of crude oil between January and December 2025. Output fluctuated throughout the year due to operational disruptions and outages, despite gradual recovery in some producing fields. Monthly production peaked at 47.70 million barrels in January and fell to a low of 41.69 million barrels in September, before rebounding slightly in the final quarter. The revenue estimate was derived using an average crude oil price of $72.8 per barrel and an exchange rate of 1,450 naira to the dollar. Although Nigeria's output remained low, its OPEC quota for most of the year, higher crude prices, particularly for Bonny Light early months, helped sustain earnings. Multitrex gets NGX nod to increase public shareholding. Multitrex Integrated Foods PLC has received approval from the Nigerian Exchange to take steps to increase its public shareholding after a recapitalization reduced its free float below main board requirements. The approval was granted by NGX Regulation Company, according to a statement issued by the firm's company secretary, Songule Adekunle. The NGX granted Multitrex a 24-month moratorium ending 14th January 2028 to restore its free float to at least 20% of issued share capital or a market capitalization of 20 billion naira, whichever is lower. The extension allows the company additional time to comply with listing rules while pursuing strategies to broaden shareholder participation. The recapitalization followed a 7-year suspension of operations and involved capital injection by N Foods Universal Concept Limited to settle obligations owed to the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. As a result, N Foods now holds 70% of the company's shares, leaving the public free float at 7.23%, valued at 117.46 million naira, based on the 2024 audited accounts. NUPRC opens 50 oil blocks for bidding. The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission has opened 50 oil and gas blocks across 5 sedimentary basins for bidding in the 2025 licensing round, stating that only technically competent and financially capable firms will qualify. The commission said the exercise aims to curb speculative participation and strengthen transparency in Nigeria's upstream sector. The chief executive of the NUPRC disclosed this during the pre-bid webinar for the licensing round, where the commission outlined the bidding framework, evaluation criteria, and commercial terms. She described the exercise as a strategic effort to boost reserves, improve production, and enhance Nigeria's energy security. Eason said the commission has adopted a strictly merit-based process with emphasis on technical expertise, financial strength, and credible development plans. She noted that successful bidders would be selected through a transparent process that covers the entire value chain, from block award to exploration, appraisal, and full production. Temitope Oluwafemi reporting for BTV News.
And now to sport news. Senegal head coach Pape Twain has been handed a 5-match ban and fined $100,000 by the Confederation of African Football following chaotic scenes during the 2025 African Cup of Nations finals against Morocco. CAF said Twain was guilty of unsporting conduct and bringing the game into disrepute during the match played in Rabat, which Senegal won 1-0. The final was disrupted in stoppage time when Senegal players walked off the pitch after Morocco were awarded a penalty, overturning a goal scored moments earlier by Ismaila Sarr. Twain instructed his players to leave the field in protest of the referee's decision, leading to a delay of about 17 minutes before the team returned following intervention by Sadio Mane. Morocco's Brahim Diaz later missed the penalty, which was saved by goalkeeper Eduardo Mendy. CAF also imposed additional sanctions, banning Ilman Ndiaye and Sarr for 2 matches each, while fining the Senegal Football Federation $615,000. Morocco players Ismail Sibari and Alkaf Hakimi received 3 matches and 2 matches bans respectively. All sanctions apply only to CAF competitions and will not affect preparations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Many thanks for staying with us on BTV Global News at 12. My name is Temitope Oluwafemi. Do have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.